Welcome back, everybody. It's springtime, turning into summertime in the wonderful land of indie reads, and we are super excited. I have a brand new author that I'm going to share with you today. Her name is Jessica Hartsfield. She's from Roscommon, Michigan, and it's so good to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for joining to, agreeing to come on the program and read for me. As I like to remind people on a regular basis, I'm simply a recovering 6-year-old, and I like it when people read out loud.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
It's going to be fun. We're going to have a good time. I haven't read your work yet, so I'm really excited to hear a little bit of it.
Okay.
I'm constantly in a mode of expanding my TBR. So that's the other reason I do this program, is because I need more material to read.
Sure.
Jessica Hartsfield became an author, adventurer, anthropologist. Okay, so you have to pronounce that word because my tongue isn't working today.
Oh, sure.
Thank
Anthropologist.
you.
Sure.
Philosopher, artist, and historian with the goal of helping others create peaceful, fulfilling, and balanced lives. Her first series, the Sisters 3 Saga. See, mouth is not functioning today.
It's a
Uh,
lot of S's.
Yeah. So her saga helps to provide lovers of mystery and mysticism a way to absorb the beauty and pain of life through the magic of connection, understanding, and love. Outside of her regular work on a day-to-day basis, Jessica spends as much time as possible having intellectual debates with her soulmate, working on books 2 and 3 of the Three Sisters saga, clogging with the Just for Kicks cloggers of Roscommon, Michigan, gardening, exploring, and spending time with the goats, chickens, dogs, and cats, and Wonderland creatures on their constantly under construction hobby farm in northern Michigan. Okay, everybody knows I'm an animal nut. So the most important thing to me about this is I gotta know what the goats' names are. Do the
Oh my
goats have
goodness.
names?
They do. There's 11 of them.
Okay, maybe not tell us all of them, but what's your
Sure.
not your favorite goat, because that's like choosing your favorite child, but
Right.
what's your favorite goat name?
Well, I have a goat named Gemma, who is quite a gem. That's where she got her name from because she's very needy and very cranky when she wants food. And then there's Pip, who is one of our weathered goats, who actually was my first baby I ever saved. I don't know, his mother rejected him, and now he's just the king of the farm, and he will do whatever he wants to do now. So
That's
they're probably
so
two of the
extraordinary.
more rambunctious ones we have.
That's spectacular. I love it when people rescue unusual domesticated animals. Are these standard goats? Are they Angora goats? Are they pygmy goats? What kinds of goats are they?
Yeah, they're Nigerian dwarf goats, so they are of the pygmy lions.
They're
But the pygmy ones are more
tiny.
meat. Yep, they're tiny little ones that we have running around.
Okay, the next time I go up to my cabin, I'm going to stop by and visit and pet the goats.
Oh, please do. They would love it.
Tell me a little bit about your writing journey. How did you decide that you were going to become a novelist? What was that trigger that made you choose this as your profession?
That's a great question. I've always liked the idea of writing in order to share stories. Um, I sometimes have trouble speaking in front of groups, and I have a small voice too. So having something that I could write and share for people to read on their own or in their own way, I thought was very intriguing. But I tried different stories over time, and nothing ever really stuck. Until I got the idea for this Kingdom of Orion series. And then I said, you know what? I have to do it. It's a story I think that people will enjoy, and I got to push through to the end. And so far, it's been a really, really wonderful adventure and a lot of work, but I'm very happy I'm doing it.
We can always make room for more stories in our lives, as far as I'm concerned. When did you start this journey? What year did you start writing?
I started writing this about 2.5 years ago. So
Okay. So you're
2021
still
at
pretty new
the
at
end.
this.
Still pretty new. Yes. Yes.
That's
Still getting
awesome.
my feet underneath me.
Are you finding it as much fun as you imagined it would be, or are you finding it to be more work than you thought it would be?
I'm actually enjoying the work. It is a lot of work, and lots of things that, you don't know what you don't know when you first get into something like this
Sure.
in a brand new industry. But it's really been fun every step of the way, honestly, even if it has been challenging.
Very cool. I'm glad to welcome you into our author community, and I hope to see many, many more stories from you as the years go on. So
Thank you.
let's make sure we stay connected and we'll get more people reading your work. That's the goal.
Definitely. That would be
So
great.
tell us a little bit about the story. I could read the synopsis, but for me, that's no fun. I want you to give me an idea of the basic plot line and talk about your heroine a little bit.
Sure. So the Kingdom of Orion series, it really tries to tell the story of the land of Mar, which is a continent in the northern Pacific that no one really knows that much about. And Esme Halley, who is the heroine, she is actually a princess from the kingdom that was self-exiled because of a lot of turmoil and chaos that was happening. But now she's grown and she has started to see that there is some crazy stuff happening around the world that she can't quite pinpoint the purpose, but she believes that her family is entwined with it in some way from the kingdom. And so now she has to face her fears and start to remember her history and start to dive into what are these troubles that are happening and how is her family intertwined and how does she help to get that fixed in order to save the world, basically.
Sounds like a really fun adventure. I'm super excited to hear from you. When you are ready, this book is The Kingdom of Orion, The Mystery of the Troubles, and it is Sisters 3 Saga. That's an interesting alliteration thing you did there. The Sisters 3 Saga feels a little bit like Fox and Socks on my tongue.
Yes, I can
It's kind
imagine
of fun.
that.
So this is The Mystery of the Troubles, which is book 1 of the saga. When you are ready, please, Jessica, take the microphone and read aloud.
All right, thank you very much. So we're going to start off at chapter 6, which is after the first major scene, but it really helps to paint some of the story and bring people into the ideas, I think. So chapter 6, Traveling Home. Esme sat quietly after dinner, staring without purpose, drained from the day's affairs. She watched as the countryside raced by the train windows, knowing, of course, that it was the other way around. They were on the train back to Avalon, thankfully all in one piece. Their stop in North Avalonia was a long ride ahead of them, so she was hopeful to have hours of reading time ahead of her. Their car on the overnight train had been empty, so she had claimed a set of seats across the aisle from Alex and Ava to stretch out, relax, and start reading. The twins were feeling much better, she was glad to see. Across the way, they chatted excitedly about their adventure, their triumph, and their ability to try multiple types of Sarnian food. Apple gusters, goat kebabs, Sarnian onigiri, and more. Alex had marked off half his list of delicacies and was beaming ear to ear. Having already checked in their passports, the conductor would not need to stop by until after they had reached the border. This would mean they would be left alone for a long stretch of the journey, and she could make some headway with their new prize. Esme stared at the cover of the book on her lap. Faded from the sun, it was now a light pink that must have been almost maroon when first published. Maroon is the main color in the kingdom's flag, and she recalled the same color flowing in her grandparents' main hall. The Kingdom of Orion, a history, it said in beautifully scripted silver thread, by Gerhard Geheimenstrager. She took a breath, letting it leak out slowly between her pursed lips. Do I really want to do this? Esme asked herself, knowing there was only one answer, however much she wanted to choose the other. She was about to fill herself in on the history of her childhood home, a place she had not seen in almost 2 decades, and a life she had not had the honor, the privilege, or the burden of living out in a very long time. It seemed so long ago when she had left the kingdom with her father Alistar at 10 years old. His broken heart had left him no choice but to rejoin his family in Avalon and attempt to put the pieces back together. Only her summers had been spent in Orion after that, but when she was 13, she decided that she would make that trip for the last time as well. A stressful feeling still covered her entire body when she tried to recall those visits with her mom and her aunts. It was helpful that her memories had receded, as, up until recently, she had rarely thought about any of them over the years, saving her years of pain. All that arose whenever she tried were times filled with fights and tears, and so she had left them at the border with everything else. For her, the kingdom had not been a good place, especially after her grandparents died. Once her father left for good, the royal family just seemed to sink into a sadness from which it could not return. She vaguely recalled hearing inklings of a growing feud between the sisters three, but had no idea what caused it. Her father had filled in bits and pieces for her over the years, but confessed that Peony never truly confided in him. She had preferred to spend their time having fun, fighting, or making up, as he put it. That meant her past was a mess of mysteries that for so long she had been glad to stuff under the bed and pretend didn't exist. Until now. Now she had to face her fears and get to the bottom of why the three princesses' relationship was constantly in turmoil and what this had to do with the troubles. Searching her mind for any remembrance of the early days, she tried to recall what it was like when her grandparents were still alive. Her vision had brought some life back to her feelings of the past, and she closed her eyes to recapture some of the comfort she had felt after seeing her grandmother again. A small tinge of happiness and warmth spread across her, but it lacked the luster, not even close to what she had experienced in the library. The kingdom felt distant and strange, a place she felt a longing for at times, but only in the way of a dream one cannot quite remember. Any friends she had made when young had fallen from her mind, and when she had severed her ties to the kingdom in favor of living full-time in Avalon, now she could barely remember their names. It sounded strange, she was sure, that her memories were so blurry, and it frustrated her now as it left her at a disadvantage in their current predicament. Yes, she had been glad to forget, but magic had made it all the easier, part of her mother's enchantments that bewitched and beguiled even the most stalwart visitors. Magic. What a beautiful and terrible thing, she thought, not for the first time. Running her fingers across the cover of the book, afraid to start this journey, she instead allowed herself to wallow in the more recent past a bit longer. Magic was tricky and could easily get out of control. It was something Esme had worked hard to comprehend over the last few years, to not only corral and control it, but also to show her respect and reverence for her gifts. Her magical abilities were traits from her grandmother's bloodline, one that touched each female born in her family in some way, and she felt a reverence for this gift. Her powers were something she felt she could never fully master. Their lessons ran so deep, and at times could still take her by surprise. Esme felt constantly torn about the power her ancestors had passed along. It had been a long, hard road, her struggle with the mystical arts. Years of trying to contain, control, and understand her powers, with many mistakes along the way. While she had little knowledge of the magical journey of the Sisters Three, she knew in her heart that the kind of pain she had experienced would never be something that her mother would ever have wanted to understand. Make no mistake, Peony was formidable, and her natural talent was strong. It was her attitude that was the problem. Malicious, arrogant, and selfish were the terms she remembered hearing often whenever a family member mentioned her mother's name. Her mother's distaste for concentration and consistency meant she didn't have the discipline necessary to grow to be a powerful sorceress, and she definitely didn't care for hard work of any kind. However, doubly gifted, Peony was great at playing the victim, able to find every possible reason as to why something wasn't her fault. It was always something else. Her mother not teaching her enough, her sisters interrupting her studies, being a wife and a mother, or even the weather. The end result was never because of anything she did or did not do, unless it came with stealing the spotlight from others. Attention was always more important than love to the king's eldest daughter, and Esme believed her mother had never cared for anyone more than she cared for herself in her entire life. Anger welled within her veins, and she clenched her fists as she thought of all the times Peony had mistreated her, neglected her, or ignored her whenever it wasn't convenient for her to be a mother. But it was hard to call her on any of it, as Peony was full of charisma, flair, and obfuscation. If the stories from her father were true, she had the ability to charm almost anyone. No pun intended, Esme thought with a sneer. And as she grew, she used this ability to satisfy any and all of her whims. To help quell his daughter and save the kingdom at the same time, her father named her ambassador of tourism when she had become of age. With her talent, she had indeed been superb. Tourism had always been a major part of the kingdom's economy, but by the time Esme could walk, it had tripled in size, much of it due to peony spells. Tourists loved to talk about their wonderful time and the great way they felt after their trip, so word spread like wildfire. However, it was often difficult for them to describe many specifics, instead, sharing their sentiments with phrases such as, I had the time of my life, and that their friends should just trust them and visit. This mystical strategy created many repeat visitors, people desperate to recapture the fun feelings over and over each time. Until recently, Esme had heard on the news each year that tourists were consistently flocking to Orion and were a large part of helping to keep the country's economy strong. A vision flashed before her eyes, one of her mother giggling with glee at her success, lording over her sisters how wonderful her magic was and how much she had everyone loving Orion. Wow, that was new. Esme had never before recalled that scene. Perhaps I'm on the right track, she whispered to the quiet car. It was ironic to Esme that while Peony's magical talents could keep tourists wanting more, those closest to her often had the desire to stay away. Charms and charisma worked for a time, but never led to a real connection. As far as Esme knew, Peony had yet to master any ability to form true bonds with another human being, or find the capacity to put anyone else but herself first. Tracing the beautiful silver script, her memory floated back through time. An anxious feeling rose within her, accompanied by stinging tears in the corner of her eyes. Come on, Esme, she whispered, taking a few breaths to calm herself. If you can't even think about them without crying, you are not going to get very far. Her lips turned up at the corners and she felt silly. It's not like they're going to manifest in front of me, for goodness sake, she mused. The time had come to open her wounds and sort the way through to the end. The conductor's voice came over the speaker then, startling her so she almost dropped the book. Esme looked down to see a light seeping through the cracks in her clenched fists. This was what she was most afraid of. Delving into the past was sure to unleash deep emotions, feelings she wasn't sure she could control, especially with the chaos of the troubles reigning supreme. But the sooner we find an answer, the sooner we can move on to other things, she said, coaxing herself back to the present and resettling the book onto her lap. Just as she was about to start reading, her cell phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she decided to answer it in case it was work or an emergency. Hello? Hello, Esme? This is Lana. Is everything okay? Lana, well, yes, everything is fine. Are you okay? Oh, yes, I'm fine. Thank you. I just never got a chance to say goodbye. I wanted to make sure you had found what you were looking for. This confirmed what Esme had felt, that the troubles were infiltrating Sarnia. She sighed, sorry she had not been able to protect the lovely librarian, but thankful the effects had now passed. Oh, so sorry about that. She thought of a quick lie to smooth things over. Ava wasn't feeling very well, and we saw you were busy helping others, so we just left quietly. Ava looked over at Esme quizzically, but her cousin brushed her off, mouthing she would tell her later. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, the kind woman replied. I hope she's feeling better. Please let your cousins know it was a pleasure to make their acquaintance. I will, thank you, and thank you for your help. We found what we needed. That is great. I'm so glad, and it was so lovely to see you. Please do not be a stranger. We should do this more often. Esme ended the call with pleasant goodbyes and shook her head. Looking over at the twins, she said, I am pretty sure we can now say Sarnia has been affected by the troubles. Lana barely even remembered meeting us today. Please be careful and tell me as soon as you notice you're struggling emotionally or mentally in any way. The twins nodded and Ava smiled weakly. I love you, Esme, she said encouragingly. Don't lose hope. We found the book and now have some direction. Esme sighed and reached across the aisle, grasping her cousin's hand and squeezing it tight. Thanks, she replied, for everything. Now you both should get some rest. We have a pretty long ride ahead. Chapter 7, Troubles and Elements. As the twins settled in, Esme did too, but she couldn't shake the dread about what she had just learned. The troubles were spreading everywhere, and having experienced this whirlwind today, she knew time was running out. Sitting back with determination, she pulled the thick book back onto her lap. If her assumptions were correct, her family was wrapped up in all of this, and she felt a responsibility to determine the trouble's source, how Orion was involved, and why the sickness had now been able to spread across the globe. She let out a long breath. There could be trouble in here, no pun intended. Looking around to ensure she wasn't disturbing anyone, she noticed that the twins were falling fast asleep across the aisle, leaning on each other for support. Thinking there was no time left to obfuscate or distract, she started right at the beginning with determination. Paging through the table of contents, she saw that the book started by explaining the very basic items about the kingdom, like a travel guide. It would be good to compare her memories to descriptions of the surroundings and what outsiders would see, and she even felt a small tingle of excitement as she started to read. Chapter 8, The History of Orion, by Gerhard Geheimenstrager. Introduction. Welcome to the story of the kingdom of Orion, a place of mystery and majesty, myth and magic. As a foreigner, someone who did not grow up in Orion, it has been a wonderful adventure to explore the layers of the land, the culture, and its people. Oronians, as they refer to themselves, are a humble and at times secretive people, and due to these qualities, no one had ever attempted to compile a full history of this tiny yet interesting kingdom. Therefore, I felt it my duty to bring awareness and an understanding to all far and wide, so that others could see the same way I do about this lovely land. My hope is that Oronians are proud of this work, and that I have done them justice in treating their home with care. Happy reading! Orion, an overview. The first thing we must get straight before we go any further is the correct pronunciation of the people's name and how it came to be. While many, including myself, have attempted to update the pronunciation with examples of Orionians, Orions, and even Oroniites, the correct way to address the people of the kingdom is as Oronians, Oronian. Now, why, one may ask, is that the case? To understand, we must head back to the beginning, to the time of the first Oronian settlements. The neighboring country of Avalon to the east was not settled until Spain arrived in the 1500s, and Sarnia to the south started as a Polynesian port in the 1200s, but Orion was already a kingdom by 500 AD. Both local lore and external historians believe that the original Oronians were escapees of Alexander the Great's eastern campaign through East Asia around 320 AD. These escapees sailed from the port of Shanghai into the middle of the Pacific Ocean with no plan other than to find a better life, praying to the gods to show them a land where they could be free and prosper. A journal found in the Royal Archives speaks of this adventure, quite possibly from one of the travelers, or at least of their kin. It explains in great detail their landing on a span of pristine beach, fully encircled by a majestic mountain range as far as the eye could see. This same journal recounts a magical story of survival. Shortly before the sailors reached the shores of Orion, they were starving and close to death. And one star-filled night, as they lay on their rafts, believing each breath to be their last, they used those breaths to pray once more to the gods, asking to be saved. Shortly thereafter, Orion's constellation came to life in front of their eyes and told them the story of his life and death and the creation of a landmass from his final tear. He then pointed them in the direction of the land, and the next day they washed up on shore. Because of this, they named the land Orion's Land and worshipped him as their consummate god. Soon after they had gathered their strength, they explored this land that had given them life. Their journey took them into the foothills and then the fine great peaks of the mountains that protect the land. Amongst these foothills and peaks were goats, leading the survivors to a way of life of herdsmen and farmers. This became the main way to make a life in Orion until the reign of King Augustus in 950 AD. This king, who will be discussed further in the royal family section, realized their land needed a more diverse choice of economic growth and started what is now a world-class shipbuilding industry. As trade expanded and foreigners arrived, the people chose to be called Oronians, or mountain people, in their native Greek. Also sending homage to the land of Orion, this term allowed them to keep multiple layers of their history within their name. As she finished this section, Esme saw the light had faded into night, and with it, she felt her eyes closing and her head nodding. The sounds of the train clacking down the track created a rhythm that over time she was unable to fight, no matter how interesting the content. Moments later, she let her exhaustion envelop her and soon slipped into a fitful sleep.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. Okay. So while you were reading, I added your book to my TBR. Thank you very much.
Great. That's wonderful to hear.
So this is book one of a 3-book saga trilogy. So how close are we to getting book 2?
Yeah, book two is in process right now. I have it fully mapped out. I'm just working on creating, finishing the wordings and the scenes and such. So my hope is by the end of this year or beginning of next, it will be available.
That's fantastic. How lovely. And when did this book come out?
It just got published this January.
So it's a baby book.
Yes,
That's
brand new on the
fantastic.
scene.
Congratulations. That's really quite wonderful. Um, so as we discover your saga and we learn more about the sisters, what is your favorite idiosyncrasy or quirk that you have given to one of the three sisters?
Hmm.
Or I should say, what idiosyncrasy or quirk have one of the three sisters exhibited for you to write about?
Sure, sure. Well, they're all so unique. I guess I'll give you just a tiny bit of each one. So Peony, who is Esme's mother, she has really the gift of beauty and beguilement, and she uses that in every possible way she can to get what
Okay,
she wants. Violet, who is has the power over electricity and orbs and communication and such, right? So technology wise. And Ivy is more of the natural witch, where she has communication with nature and with animals and such too. So you'll see more of that expand as I go into different parts of the saga.
that's very fun. I love how you take little pieces and to make a whole tapestry of character. I'm really drawn to characters that are built that way. So thank you for doing
Oh,
that.
thank you.
I'm so glad that you came on the program. I appreciate you reading out loud for us, and I look forward to the next time you can come back and read book two.
I would love to. It was very fun to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. I hope you have a marvelous day.
Thank you as well.